My whole journey applies to how I work with my herd now because it always blows me away. It's just like it's mirrored because it's all about thresholds, right? And in our nervous system and building capacity, but we can't build capacity if we break through thresholds.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Reinforce the Horse. Today we're here with Peggy OKelly, and Peggy began her career in San Francisco as a CPA with Peat Marwick. In 1990, with two young daughters, she moved back to her hometown in Napa Valley and founded St. Helena Olive Oil Company. After 25 years of growing this business, she suffered a traumatic brain injury, rendering her a stranger to herself. Having little access to her executive functioning, she listened to the cues of her body, leading her on the path of mind, body, and spirit connection. Along the way, she gathered teachings from healers of all medicines. Her most profound healer continues to be Roxy, a Warmblood Mare who she met while recovering in the eastern Sierras of California. Their mutual struggle with dysregulated nervous systems created an immediate and powerful connection. With no specific intention other than to share insights from her healing journey with Roxy, they found themselves delving into a profound exploration of the human horse connection. In gratitude, they created Congruence Tucson, a place to share their learning and holds the space for other humans and horses awakening to the healing power of their true nature. Peggy, welcome to Reinforce the Horse. It's so wonderful to have you here today. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing well, thanks. It's great to be here and finally meet both of you. And um, it's interesting when you were saying all that, I was feeling the surrealness of this as it's it's one thing to go through your journey, and then it's another thing to listen to it being recounted to you at
Uh,
this stage, anyways. So
for
thank you.
sure. There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot in your journey, and I'm really excited to dive in and talk a little more with you about really your journey with horses. And with that in mind, can you tell us a little bit more about where your horsemanship journey began?
I had ponies when I was, well, we lived in the Bay Area in Oakland, California. And when I was 9, we moved up to the Napa Valley, which at that point in time, there was a lot of farmland still up there, not as many vineyards. And there was nothing, and it was a big adjustment. And so my parents said there were six of us, but two of us wanted horses if we were going to have to move to this place that seemed like in the middle of nowhere. So my parents agreed. So I started out with Little Clover, who was a little tiny Shetland pony um, that I rode and I learned 4-H. We boarded it at a friend's house, and I did 4-H, and we just had fun riding through the hills and going in the reservoirs, and it was kind of my safe place. It was my happy place, um, a place I spent summers and every moment after school that I could get over there. And then I had when my feet were hitting the ground on Clover, I got a little Welsh pony named Little Ben and did the same thing with him. And we were in parades, and it was just fun and learned things about horses. But I never, it wasn't like I really had to take care of them because they were being boarded somewhere else. So it was more the connected relationship and the healing sense of it, which I didn't even know at the time. But so then I got into high school, and so other things became more important, and I left horses. But they've always, like you hear so many people say, they've always stayed in my life in different ways, and they were always in my heart. I always knew I would get back to them at some point in my life, and I had different experiences. My sister had horses at one point, so we would ride, and so just like sporadic things. So, but every once in a while, because I was working in the city and my life was becoming crazy, and um, I would think, oh my gosh, will I ever have a horse back in my life? There's just no room, there's no way, and I would feel that need for them, but it would go away, and I'd read a book or on horses or do something and get satisfied in different ways of that connection. And then in 2015, I was in a car accident and I had a traumatic brain injury, and it took my life out from under me. And up to that point, I always had the attitude of I can push through anything, go, 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 bigger, 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 um, and nothing can ever stop me until I had a brain injury and it stopped me. And I could not, I lost my executive functioning. So I could no longer, I couldn't stand any stimulation. I lived on a property that was 12 acres kind of in the mountains. And so I ended up spending most of my time with my new puppy in with the land, with the plants, meditating with plants. I couldn't because I couldn't stand stimulation and I couldn't form things, sentences and concepts in my mind. And when I would, I couldn't speak them. So it was much easier and felt much better to be in nonverbal relationships. And so I was like, had the yearning for a horse was like full on. And I thought, well, I have no business getting a horse now, but I want a sketch of a horse, or I need something that I can look at and like connect to. And so I thought I'm gonna find somebody to sketch a horse. And so I had a couple people and they sketched things, and I was just like, oh, it doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel right. And then I had this journal that had gotten a year before, and it was such a special journal for me. And I was doing the Reiki master training for the prior year. And it was a journal I would take with me, and I could open it up, and there were these beautiful sketches of horses in it, and stories and painting, and the woman's story was so amazing. And one day I looked down, and it was at my feet, and I looked down at it, and I thought, why wouldn't I reach out to her to sketch something? So I called her, and it was Kim McElroy. And I called her and I said, this is going to sound really strange, but then I told her and we connected immediately. She's so wonderful. And she said something which I don't think she'll mind me sharing is she said right away, she said, oh, you're who I wrote the journal for, or I created the journal for. And I was like, what? And she goes, yeah, she goes, I guess it didn't amount to the typical things that she did and the level maybe that she thought it would be. But she immediately connected that, and I was like, wow, that's amazing, what an incredible person. And so she did this beautiful, we just went back and forth, and she really understood my story. And Kim, and she's such an intuitive, incredible artist, and she had never really sketched something before because she'd painted, but she gave it a try, and it's of course beautiful. And I have it in here. I'll have to show you at some point. But and then I named her the Enchanted Nomad. I took off for Europe because I wanted to just go. I had to be gone and just be by myself, and so that's a whole nother story. But when I was over there, I sat with a picture of it on my phone, and I named her the Enchanted Nomad. Um, and then that picture became my guide. And then Kim had a horse healing event at her property, and she invited me to come up for it. I think there were 8 women. And so I thought, sure. So I went up for that, and it was really hard because I was still not, it was still hard to travel. It was hard to express myself. There was just so much still going on, and it was such a safe group of women. And so when I went, she said, now, um, it was a situation where you would sit in the middle, you would go out in the middle of her herd, and you'd sit in a chair, and then you'd close your eyes and you'd think about the horse that you wanted to connect with, and then the whole experience would just unfold. And so, and then the other women would be watching, and we would, if we were watching, you would write down like what you were in your words of intuition that you were getting, and then we would come back together and share. It was really beautiful. But I was sitting in this chair, and I wanted to connect to her horse Dharma, who and I remember sitting there, and still, because of all my self-doubt and everything that was happening just because of the injury, and I was thinking, oh, she'll never connect. Is not going to work. She's not going to connect to me. And all of a sudden I felt this presence and I opened my eyes and there was Dharma. And I was like, whoa, this is crazy. And long story short on that, I mean, I could go on forever just on what happened there, but she came right up to me and had an exchange, and her muzzle went right to this part of my brain or my head and stood there. And she stayed there and she worked there. And at one point in time, she took a bite, not out of me, an air bite, almost violently. And for whatever reason, I was sitting in a chair, so I was very vulnerable. For whatever reason, and it could be because I couldn't react, but also I didn't react. I mean, I should have been scared, and but I didn't react, and I don't know why. But she just like took something, and then I think it was Mystico that came over. All of a sudden, she came around the left side of me, and she started working on this side of my head. And I look over and all the women are crying, and I'm crying. And she's working, but then Dharma was very much in charge. And Dharma was like telling Miss Koge, now go away. Okay, now you can come. So it was it was just fascinating and it was beautiful and so healing. And at the end of that, because coming into that, I knew I could not go back to the life that I had. And I didn't know, how am I going to sustain myself? How am I going to exist? I was used to being very much in control of, or I thought I was in control, right, of my, how I wanted to have a lifestyle. And I could earn that and I could work hard to earn whatever I needed to. And when I left there, I wrote in my journal that I want to do this. Or this is something that I could do. Like I could do this, even with my brain in this case, it's embodied work. And it just felt like this is what I want to do. But then I was like, this is my mind, of course, came in and was like, that's crazy. Like, how could you ever do that? So anyway, so I come back and I have the olive oil company because at this time, it was 2 years that I still didn't believe my doctor and I still was trying to work back to getting back to that place where I could start it again. And my healing was kind of coming to a plateau. And so I had this event. I came back and I went to my house and I was texting my daughter and there was a really bad windstorm. And uh, I was in a mountain area that had tons of huge oak trees, and I was really afraid an oak tree was going to fall over, and on the property, and that was my fear. And again, I'm dealing with locked in sympathetic because of the brain injury. So then everything's, I'm afraid of everything. I'm like a wounded animal, and so I'm texting with my daughter, and I said, I think I'm just going to watch a movie and go to bed. And she's like, okay, good night. And then the power goes out, and it's pitch black. And so I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go to bed. And so I got my dogs, and I got in bed, and I started to fall asleep. And I felt the sensation in my body that I had never felt, which was interesting in itself because I had a lot of sensations from the brain injury. So it was just a different sensation, and it woke me up because I thought that's weird. And then I thought, well, I'm just going to check out to see what the trees are doing. And I open up the um, shade, and I see this kind of orange hue, and I'm like, that's weird. And because I'm still kind of out of it, I'm like, maybe I'm falling back to sleep. I'm like, maybe that's my night light. And then I'm like, wait a minute, I don't have electricity. And so I'm like, what? And I get up and I go in the living room and I look, and the whole side of the hill's on fire. Uh, which, yeah, it's still obviously emotional to talk about. Um, just when you think you've done your work, right? It still surfaces. Um, and so it was pitch black, and I would always take my dog's collars off and put them by the door. And uh, I didn't put them by the door that night for whatever reason, and I had to search, and I was searching the whole house for these collars, and I knew I wasn't didn't have much time, so um, I just looked, oh, and I was trying to find them, and all of a sudden I felt this whoosh of energy, like a grounding energy, and I looked down, it was my dog Bella, and she was looking up at me like, I've got this, let's go. Like, and she would normally take off. And so she gave me what my the belief that we could run to the car. So I ran to the car with her across the drive, which was pretty big. And we ran across, threw her in the car, backed up as fast as I could, ran in, picked up Jax because he was just this puppy bouncing around everywhere. Came, threw him in the car, and off we went and down to my sister's, and uh, and that created a whole nother story. But I'm getting back to horses. So what that did was it catapulted me out of that situation, out of having any possibility to go back to my former life. Like the universe was just like, you do not listen. So here we're gonna just like move you forward. And so I ended up going to Southern California because my daughters were down there and just trying to get my ground again and figure out what I was going to do and knowing that, you know, all of the unknowns. And then, long story short, a lot of really beautiful things happened in Santa Barbara. And it was such a important part of my healing. I found doctors that I would have never found that made me able to be back in the world again on a certain level. And then I decided, well, my family kind of decided, why don't you go live with Betsy and Harold, my sister and brother-in-law, in Bishop, California, by Yosemite, for those that don't know. And I was thinking, oh my God, it's like in the middle of nowhere. Like, what am I doing? And I'm renting a room from my sister. And it's like, even though I love my sister and they're wonderful people, but I'm driving there with, and unfortunately, Bella had died in Santa Barbara suddenly. That's another story. But I'm driving there with Jax. We have everything we own in the car. And I'm driving there and I said, okay, I can do this. I was like talking to the universe. I'm like, I can do this, but I get a horse. I get a horse for this. And so I get to my sister's and like within the first hour of conversation, I said, by the way, I need a horse. And she's like, oh, okay, great. You know, that's horse country. We can figure that out. And so uh, she, I don't know how much detail you want me to go into,
So,
but there was just so much.
yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
you had so much leading up to kind of bringing horses back into your life, it sounds like. And oh, it seems like everybody's journey, um, I don't know if you've heard it, but yeah, I'm sure you have, like, and I don't know, like, where the quote comes from or the particular person or whatever, but it's like, uh, if we don't learn the lesson that the universe is trying to teach us at any given time, it kind of keeps like bringing it back and bringing it forward to ultimately teach us until we learn it. Have you heard anything like that?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I've definitely learned that lesson.
Yeah. So I would like if you could just shed some more light on that, perhaps, because you mentioned being like a CPA and an entrepreneur and owning a business. And it sounds like just hearing all of that, like it sounds like perhaps your left brain, your analytical mind was very active and you're just a very like powerful go-getter in like kind of the business practical realm. But it sounds like there was like this yearning calling to you to be more calm and creative of sorts. And um did you find that transition, that the forest fire pushing you into a calmer state of being and then horses arrived, or was it more uh your desire to do that? Was it something pushing you or was it your own desire?
That's a really interesting question, and I have never thought of it from that perspective, and I look forward to thinking even more about that. But as you say it, my instinct, the first thing is, oh no, I had that desire, right? But and I always knew the fire was the thing that had to happen to kind of, kick me in the butt and get me out of that situation. Because I was asking for guidance. I mean, I've always asked for guidance, and I was asking for it. And, but then it's really interesting to think that horses arrived when I started to come, because I look at it between the masculine and the feminine. I was totally in 100% masculine, a wounded masculine energy for most of my life. And, and then I actually had an astrologist tell me, like a year before all this happened, something's going to happen in your life that is going to shift you into the feminine, and you can not do it, but it'll be like walking up the Colorado River. And that always stuck in my head through this whole journey. Every time I wanted to resist, I was like, oh, do I want to walk up the Colorado River? I don't think so. And so I would let go and let go. So it's interesting and a really beautiful thought. Like, horses arrived when I was ready, like when I got to that space. So I would say that, yeah, definitely.
I feel like the body stores more memory than our
Right.
minds do. And,
Definitely, yeah.
after a traumatic incident like a vehicle accident, and even what you experienced with the fire in your home, the physical fire, of course, like the brain brings in through the sensory organs and then ultimately stores a lot of that memory within the body. So did the horses at any point in time help you through getting to those memories and kind of purging them out and healing them?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what happens with a brain injury is you become so, I mean, they're all different, but you get so sensitized. So if you, if, and my whole journey applies to how I work with my herd now, because it always blows me away. It's just like, it's mirrored, because it's all about thresholds, right? And in our nervous system, and building capacity. But we can't build capacity if we break through our thresholds, because then we go into a survival state where our cognitive shuts down, and we don't have access to a regulation, which is, in my opinion, for sure, is which is a lot of people's, I think, but for me, what I've learned, and this is a little bit off topic, but what I've learned is that, our true nature is when we're in a regulated state in our biology. And if that makes sense, right? Because if our biology is working as intended and we're regulated, then we're working according to our nature. And our nature is the same nature as a horse, the same nature as a plant. We're all connected, right? So when we can tap into that, we're tapping in. We can't deny our connectedness. We can't um we can't harm other aspects of nature. So that's kind of, I just told you the ending of where my brain injury and then horses have led me. um but so yeah, the intuition on the fire, totally, because my executive functioning was shut off, and I was in a survival mode, and all I could do was meditate with plants on my property, and be with my dog, with this puppy that was showing me the joys of life. I thought, how am I gonna handle this puppy? But I could tune into the joy, the simplicity. And so when I met Roxy, and she had all these labels put on her, and they said, you probably don't want to meet her because she doesn't get along with other horses. She's hard to manage. She panics. She's this and she's that. She was in an accident. She's afraid of trailers. And I was like, actually, she sounds like somebody I'd like to meet. And when I saw her, I didn't see this crazy horse. I saw me, like I saw my nervous system in her, and I immediately felt compassion, because I thought, she doesn't want to be like this. And what happens is like they had to take horses away from being next to her, and then she was a dressage horse, and then she never got to they stopped riding her for dressage, right? And so this is kind of, it's such a bigger picture of what we do. It's like in a brain injury too, you self isolate, but then we get with mental health, we get all this labeling, and then it just grows. It just even reinforces the issues. instead of embracing and connecting and helping co-regulate. And so anyway, so I saw Roxy. And so the interesting thing is, like, I think I wonder if what has helped me can help her. Because again, I didn't have any horsemanship. She's a big warmblood mare. I hadn't been around horses for a long time. And I called my doctor and I said, "Do you think this would work on a horse?" And he was like, "I don't know, but they have the same nervous system, so can't hurt to try." So I started, I leased her for 3 months just to see, like, does this make sense? And I started working with her from outside the corral, and I introduced Palo Santo was the first oil, just to kind of clear the space and start clearing the the energies, and just like start connecting and getting rid of all this stuff was put on her, and put on, and that was my story too. I mean, it was very reflective of my experience as well. And it's more impactful when you go from being like, "Oh, I'm in charge of my life, and look at me," and not that I was super egotistical, but there is a part of that, that's just like, "Yeah, look what I can do." And uh uh so and then all of a sudden it gets taken away from you, and all of a sudden people aren't showing up for you, and you're getting labeled, like you're having experiences in the public where people are treating you like you're an idiot because you can't speak a word. So it's like, so it's very much in my face, this lesson. And so with Roxy, it was like, no, she's not. I'm gonna see if I can do what I wish would have happened for me and everybody else that's experiencing this. And so, but the funny thing is I started working with her. She started calming down. I didn't know what I was doing. Like, I knew my neuro doctor was amazing, and he was the first person that explained to me how the nervous system works. And he's the first person that said, if you want your brain to heal, you're going to have to heal your emotional body. And I was like, what does that even mean? And like, I'm good. And so I had an understanding of how to heal the nervous system and how to regulate. But then, so as time went on and she started to get calmer and we started to form a bond, I would still be super scared. Like, I would be walking her and she'd be like spooking, and I'd just say to her, "Look, I'm scared too. So you got to help me out here." Like, we would have this partnership. Uh, in and then what happened is, my doctor one day said, "Do you know?" He goes, "I know you're really excited about what's happening with Roxy, but," he said, "do you know that you're healing too? Because you're like my tracking ability, all the things that they measure." He's like, "You're having a significant healing in your process right along with her." And that was like, wow, that's crazy. And how funny, because here I'm like, "I'm healing you." And it's like, oh, who's healing who here? Or are we healing together? Even better, right? And so, and then we just things happen. We took it from there. But I always felt like when it was time for me to move on, I felt like she gave me the strength to move on. Well, that was the other thing, is I came to a point where I really let go of this certain lifestyle that I wanted to get back to. And I really had to come to grips with, if I just even have a little piece of land and I have Roxy, I'm going to be okay. And that was, until I came to that, our life didn't start shifting in the other direction, where things happened in order for us to move on. And then we came here, and we've been lucky enough to be able to develop this property. But that didn't come to until I got the big lesson and the really deep understanding. Like, you know what? I would like, I don't need everything as long as I have Roxy.
Thank you for that. That really resonates. I mean, we spent we told this story a number of times on our podcast, but horses entered our lives in 2019, and we were just starting to build this house, which isn't finished yet, on 10 acres of raw land. And this past August, my partner and I broke up, and she went her direction, and I'm going mine. And it sounds a lot like, of course, it's not like a forest fire, that came through and like pushed me out of the house, but figuratively it is. It's
Yeah.
a certain shift and change that um because I had this particular life already crafted out, and then came back around to feeling like, well, my manifestation abilities aren't that great, you know. um and so it just, you said something, it's like that your doctor told you that if you want to heal your brain, you have to heal your emotional body. And man, I found that to be so true in my own life. Does that lead to the heart math work that you do? Can you tell us about how that entered into your work and life?
I don't do heart math.
Oh, okay, I thought you did.
No, I don't do, I mean, I know of heart math, but I do nervous system. Like, here's the thing about what I know and how I like to, because I've struggled too with what am I doing here? What's my offering? And how do I market it? And then I'm like, oh, I'm going back. Like, I'm going back to where I was. I'm building a business. What am I doing? Like, I'm recreating. Yes, it's different and it's in the healing, but I'm sure you understand. It's like, but there's this, how do you navigate and stay true to yourself um, and and not get caught up in the noise and in the ego and just stay organic. I mean, part of me just wants to put on my website, I don't really know what's going to happen. You show up and we work through it, and it happens. Okay. So just trust me and trust the horses, trust the surroundings. Cause I believe when things happen here, and even with me too, it's like, when I work with the horses energetically, I call in the nature, the plants, the everything. We're all doing this together. There's no separation, and it's powerful. It's much more powerful than calling in. Well, I shouldn't say that. It's just really powerful to be able to have that resource. But the thing is, with the emotional body, what I learned was that after going through a lot of, like, I'm doing this somatic experiencing program with Peter Levine, and I just did a 6 month polyvagal program with Deb Dana, and it makes total sense because we have, I mean, to put the science aside, because, um, but the way I like to look at it is when we're regulated, our body knows how to take care of itself and our body knows how to heal itself. And we can use plant medicines and we can use all these natural things that then work with our systems and work with our body for healing. But if we are in a survival state, then our body's energies are going out to protect us because it's perceiving that we're in danger. So there's not the pool of energy to then be able to heal us and to be able to go to those parts. And then if we use medicines that suppress what's happening, depending on, and I'm not judging because everybody does what we do, but what I've learned for me and for the horses is, and my dogs, when I've gotten everybody off of different medicines that were suppressing things that were happening, and we could see actually what was the issue. And it always, to me, begins with regulated nervous system because that's the place that we're going to heal. And that was the message of my doctor, which I didn't understand it all at the time, but I trusted him because he was the first person that told me, because I got pushed around a lot, which people with brain injury do. He was the first doctor that said, I know exactly what's going on with you, and this is it. And he happened to be spiritual too. That was a whole nother beautiful serendipitous meeting. And he's like, um, and he continues to just be there. And he would always say, just look at it as an adventure every time I would get stuck. And so, so yeah, so the nervous system is really important to me. Like, And we should understand our own biology, right? Like we should know, like they should teach us when we're kids, like, hey, this is what your nervous system does, and this is why you go here, and this is how you can bring it back, and make it real because it's part of us. It's part of who we are. It drives how we live in the world. Like if we live in a survival state, we're seeing cues of safety as danger, and we're missing cues of safety. So we're just like misinterpreting everything, and then it's just adding to the trauma and to the stress, and then it decreases our body's ability to do what it is nature is intended, and that's to be able to heal itself. And so I could feel my brain healing. Oh, I mean, it's been a long process, and it's taken a lot of time to when you heal this way. But as the deeper I got into my practices, the more I healed, and I see the same thing that with the horses. I don't have any horse experience, but yet this is like innate in us. We all have the ability to be able to connect to animals, and be able to know what they need and help them and support them. And um, yeah, so, but it took me a long time to accept that in myself, because I kept thinking, who am I to think I can relate to them, right? But anyway, I kind of went off there. But that's what I do. So what I like to do is, and what I've just started having programs, and is teaching people the basics of the nervous system, and then getting them to, I'm sure you've heard about it. You've heard the terms of ventral and dorsal vagal and sympathetic, but then getting people to rename those, like to sit with that and say, okay, this is a scientist that named them these, right? But this is your body, this is your experience. So sit with that and name them. And so it really like embodies the experience. Like that's your body, and you get to name your parts, right? And so that's the big thing for me. And then the horses just naturally come in, just like Kim showed me many years ago. They just come in, and all of a sudden I'll be like, oh, looks like Champagne's got something to say. And so I stop talking. And then she has an experience with somebody that then brings out, you guys know, that brings out, this thing that needed to come out, and this incredible healing that took place that would have never happened had I continued talking about the vagus nerve or something like that. So they're to me just they just bring their magic. But I do believe that when we can connect on that level, when we're in this regulated state, like we feel the magic of the plants, of each other, of animals, um, and then all this other stuff that we think we need really doesn't matter anymore.
For sure. And I think that we're all divine sentient beings, regardless of if we're a plant, we're an animal, we're a human, and it's such a powerful thing to be able to connect with the horses in that way, and show them that we care about their feelings and their emotional state. And like you were just saying, it's quite magical when they feel that and they reciprocate it to us. And you mentioned earlier about the system, and how we should be teaching people how our systems work. And largely humans are so stuck in their head and in the past or the future, and very little we're in the present. And but the horses are so tuned into their bodies. They
Mm.
really have a way of teaching us how to step into our bodies. Can you shed a little bit more light on, I suppose, your journey in feeling your nervous system come back to, say, a normal state with Roxy, and how she coached you through that?
Mm. Yeah, just I think she made me feel safe. Um, and and um, by connecting to her, by coming to her and thinking, well, I'm gonna, I think I can help you. I'm gonna meditate with you, um, and seeing her respond to that, she gave me. um, she gave me a sense of worth back. Of um, I've never really thought deeply about. I haven't thought deeply about this in a long time, but she just, I know the feeling. She just made me feel connected to another being who cared about me. And not that I didn't have people that cared about me, but there was something different about Roxy. And maybe it's because she was so big and so powerful. And that's kind of interesting. So big and so powerful, and yet we could come together in stillness and in our shared trauma and our shared dysregulation. I understood her completely. And I think there was something in that she knew that I did, and then she understood me, and there was something in me. Um, and so we worked together just in doing this. And then somebody said to me, "Have you ever heard of trust technique?" And I said, "No." And she said, because again, I wasn't from the horse world, so I didn't know any of this. And she said, "It looks like you're doing trust work. You should check it out." And so I looked up, "Have you heard of trust technique?"
Yeah, we
Yeah.
have.
So James French and Shelley, they're wonderful, and I talked to them, and they were super supportive, and so I've worked in their program up until the end. Um, I haven't gotten certified. I just did it for my own, but I'm still in it. So like, but solidly for like 5 years, I was just like watching the videos and using the techniques. And I think he was like one of the first ones from my perspective. Now everybody's talking about it, right? But I didn't find anybody else at that time that was coming from that perspective. And so they had a huge influence on the way that Roxy and I started to really connect on a deeper level. And for me to have confidence, like, okay, I'm not just out here thinking I'm doing something that's really not happening. So that was a huge influence. And then the biggest thing was she was afraid of trailers. And when I was going to, when it turned out I was going to be moving to Arizona, the biggest thing was her getting on a trailer. So we did a lot of work around that, and it came to the point where she trusted me to walk up to a trailer. But then when it came time to, we were scheduled to leave, and so I felt like, okay, we're good, we're going to be able to go. Something happened with the house that I had to be down here, and so and then the driver, something happened in their life. They got delayed for a couple weeks, and so I wasn't going to be able to be with Roxy when she loaded on the trailer. So and this is kind of a random story, but I was so worried, and I just connected to her from Arizona, and I was just tuning into the connection to her, and I was just holding her space. And then everybody, like 10 people turned up at that ranch because everybody was so excited. And one thing I didn't mention was I found out later that the three women that introduced me to her, they had been holding a prayer circle for a long time, calling for Roxy's home. And one of them said that he thought the home was coming, that Roxy was going to be going to Arizona. And that was before I even knew I was coming to Arizona. And they didn't even share that with me until after I was here. So those women were like, "Don't worry, we'll take care of it." And like, I think 10 people showed up that night, and they sent me a video right after she loaded, and they all just got together, and one of them did Reiki symbols behind her and loaded her on that trailer, and off she came. And then the flip side of it too is once she got here, and now I have 10 horses. I was going to get her a friend, but I have 10. Is she's the main co-regulator here. So she co-regulates when somebody comes in, and she definitely is still very much my partner in all of this, and she still continues to help me as well as they all do. I mean, we're all now in one big healing pod here with everybody, but um,
Hmm. That's amazing and very synchronistic to what we have going on. And I know Alyssa wants to hop in on this too. I did want to talk to you a little bit more about the trust technique, and forgive me, that's what I meant, because I think Kim had mentioned that
Uh,
you had done some work with the trust technique, and for some reason mixed that with heart math, which is also synchronistic, because I think for our listeners, I mean, these things that we're talking about, and we've mentioned them, we've had various guests talk about these aspects, heart math being, they do a lot of work between, understanding the human heart and how that integrates with
right.
our environment and frequencies and all those sorts of things. And then the trust technique. So James French is kind of the founder of that. And I've done a little bit of work in the trust technique, kind of the basic course I went through, or Alyssa and I both went through a couple years ago.
Yeah.
And and then later stumbled upon yoga, which yoga is, thousands of years old, and was very I was very surprised to see just the similarities in the two, which brings me back to what you said earlier, just about um basically we're all connected to nature and everything's connected, which for those who are listening that might not know, that is effectively what yoga means, is union. And
Right.
it's just, I mean, we can it's just, there's so many different tools in the toolbox or pathways that we can get to get to the point to where we are going within and having this self-regulation, to where then we can open ourselves and be um, in a space that we're aware and open to, not only communicating with ourselves but animals and plants, and just interacting just in a much cleaner way,
Right.
for lack of better expressions, with the world around us. And so
Definitely.
I wanted to get into the trailering a bit more, because we have this going on as we speak. And um we've kind of put an episode about it. We're actually in the process of selling this property that we're on. And Alyssa's decided to keep the horses with her. And so she's in the process of relocating, which is a fantastic process all in and of itself. But our horses have not been the greatest at trailering, because it's not been something that we've done, consistently. And
Right.
one horse in particular, she's our third horse that we got. Her name's Grace, and she's a wild Mustang.
Mm.
And it was like a year or so ago, a little over a year ago, she was bit by a rattlesnake. And so that
Mm.
totally changed like the whole haltering experience. We were just getting
Mm.
uh her comfortable with that. And so we're in this kind of timeline now of getting her, fully comfortable with the halter and trailering. And uh I don't know if you want to hop in and kind of talk a bit more about that, or uh if you have some wisdom to shed on that, Peggy, that'd be fantastic.
Well, I have some a practical thing that actually I listened to to one of your podcasts, and I heard that about you had a hard time trailering them to your property. And if you know how to drive a longer trailer, I have a Warmblood um, trailer that's got a box and it has two, and then so it's for three horses, and it's really tall and it's really conducive. It's got a ramp. I think it's like I mean, to me, I got this trailer because of Roxy. I thought, okay, I don't want to if I get in a situation, I don't want, and I have to load quickly. So I'm saying if you can drive it, because I am just getting the hookup on my truck for it, but you're welcome to borrow it. Like we can take it and help you. It might make it easier because there's space in there. I don't know. But I mean, it depends. I mean, there are a lot of people out there that do, here I go, like that actually are do horsemen and they do trailer videos, and but I go back to just that connection, that coming into co-regulation and then the desensitization, probably everything that you're doing. It just, when you get a timeline put on it, it's when you're like, oh, not there yet, right? So to me, I would like, if you want to take me up on that, just let me know. But depending on how, I don't really know to what extent um, Grace is, like how afraid she is of it. But I had 3 months, and Roxy and I we were doing our thing, and then we would just get closer and closer to a trailer. But it became not about the trailer so much, because I have found, like with all of the horses now, when you build capacity, it's just like when we build capacity. When I had a brain injury, I had no capacity, so I was afraid of everything. I was seeing everything as danger, and so my whole journey has been rebuilding that capacity and understanding how. And the same thing with all the horses that come, because most of them come from trauma, and they're scared of different things. So it's just like you're saying with Grace. So how do you build her capacity? And that's giving her these moments of regulation and trust. I mean, James French is he, I'm sure, does a trailer thing, but his methods work. I mean, and so then what happens is they have this capacity. So I don't have to work with a tarp with my horses, or if I want to introduce do something new, I don't have to necessarily desensitize them to that, because they have trust and capacity. I may have to go a little bit slower because it's something new, but they have the capacity to work with. So, and that's the same thing with us as humans. And that's kind of, I go back to what I'm offering here, and it's education about the nervous system, but also helping people learn how to build that capacity, resources, because we all have, they're prey animals, but we have a negativity bias too. So we have to make an effort to see the good biologically. So if people are negative people, it's just because their negativity bias is kind of out of control. And so but we all have it. And so we all have to make that effort to see the good. And that happens when we build the capacity for regulation. And yeah, it just takes time. That's the thing.
That makes so much sense, and
Mm.
that totally resonates. We currently have 3 horses. We have 2 Mustangs and a Bashkir Curly. Bashkir Curly, his name is Cody. He's awesome. He does just about anything. The Mustang mares come from, I mean, they all come from a lot of trauma, but the Mustang mares come from a lot of call it like trailer relocation trauma. And Grace, I feel like she's
Uh,
had a lot go on with her
oh,
in the
right.
halter. Willow, the other my Mustang mare, she's like, I mean, this horse just likes to play and learn, and she's just awesome. And she's been a huge like helper and helping Grace get comfortable with not only like us as humans being around her, but some of the other tools that we use, like the brushes, and learning to walk with us without a halter on or whatever. But it's uh it's definitely a learning process of like, okay, how are we going to not only get you haltered and trailer ready before the trailer gets here, but also do that in a manner in which you feel safe and you feel seen, heard, felt, and gotten the entire time. And that's something that
Mm,
I, as of recent, have really struggled with, because there's an infinite amount of ways that one can go about training a horse. And I I don't want to do it the wrong way. I don't want to shut her down. I don't want to make her feel like she's not being listened to. And a lot of it, I think, has to do with my confidence level and being able to,
right.
listen to her and whatever. But I really appreciate what you were saying about just continuing to listen, and the fact that it's possible to do. I mean, you did it with a mare who had also a lot of trailer trauma. So thank you for
Yep.
that.
Yeah. And two, it's so, again, it goes back to like what I would say is what are you being taught right now? Like you said, it has to do with you, and we know right now that so much of our energy affects them. And so what do we have to work on? Because we're always, it's like me saying, I'm going to heal Roxy. Well, Roxy was healing me. It's like, well, what do I need to work on before I even go out and see Gracie? I mean, I know you guys are tuned into that. And so it's working on that. And because if you're not able to be present and confident, then in my experience, neither are they. And it's just kind of like people. Like if you're around somebody and you're like, I don't know, should we run across that river? If they're like, yeah, we can do it, you go and you run across the river. But if you really feel like you want to, and they're like, well, I don't know, what if we fall on that rock, or what if we, and yeah, I'm not sure I can do it. Then you're like, oh, yeah, I don't really want to do it either.
It's funny you mentioned that. It's just yesterday. It's like from time to time, the dad in me will come out,
Yeah.
and the prior military sergeant will come out, and say like, "All right, so we got this mission. We need to accomplish it. We know we don't want to discount any of the stuff that we've done and like all the progress that we've made emotionally, spiritually, and otherwise." And so just last week, I mean, I would still approach Grace, and for some reason, she turned off to me. When we first got Grace, it was back in January of 23. And I was the one that was doing the majority of the work with her. And I almost had her haltered in a short period of time. And then she got bit by the rattlesnake, and that kind of threw us all off. And then life happened, and I kind of took a back seat. We both did, of working with her. And it just seems like, you know, we didn't want to throw out all the progress that we had made, but we did take like a really big like step backwards, or multiple steps backwards, it felt like, because it got to a point, I've done some traveling and come back, and Grace won't, she'll let me approach her and be with her, but she wasn't like all about me scratching her or anything like that, which I respect. But just in the past, like, you know 48 hours, she's like walked up to me and said like, scratch my whole body,
Mm. Oh,
and
nice.
I'm just like, uh yesterday reminding Alyssa that, you know sometimes there's practicality in the way that we have to, as humans, for logistical purposes and stuff, set timelines to get things done. And that doesn't mean that we totally discount the progress that we're making in a more micro format, inching toward
Right.
that ultimate goal. Have you had times where you felt like, the goal was so insurmountable, whether it would be loading a horse on a trailer or particular
Oh.
healing processes, where you had to like remind yourself to just look at it more on a micro basis, day by day?
Oh my God. Yeah, my days are full of them because I have four horses that are um, in need of a lot of care, and um, uh, they have, like I think the majority have come with Cushing's, and one has severe osteoarthritis, and she's younger, and she was a cutting horse, and so she's actually been my biggest challenge because she came so wound tight, and she would let you do anything that you wanted her to do at first, but you knew it was because she was appeasing you, like she was afraid. And so we had to unravel that and just like let her have choices, right? And let her know she could have choices. But now that she has choices, now she's just like she's in pain again. And um uh, and she, again, it sounds like with what you experienced, Jason, like I was really close to her and I do a lot of energy work with her and I do Masterson method and really helpful for her. And she's really sensitive energetically. Like I can work off of her body by like 4 feet and she responds to it. It's just amazing. And she's also teaching me like, yeah, this is real. Like, cause I'm like, oh, this can't be real, and then she'll show me, this is real. So anyway, so we've gone back and now for whatever reason, she's not wanting me near her. And I need to be near her because I need to do this. Well, listen to me. I feel like I need to do this work with her so she can get some ease in her body. And, but I think like logically that makes sense, but we get in our own heads about it. And so, and then it becomes, then I felt this anxiety within myself, like, and then all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, she's not going to respond to me coming in like this and almost being like a really irritating healer. Like, I'm going to do this to you, it's good for you. And it's like, well, okay, what am I supposed to do? And so last night I went into the crowd. So you brought this up because I'm just like, I don't know what to do. So she was eating, and last night I went into the corral and I sat down and I meditate a lot, but I don't often get into a formal position. And I just felt like it. So I got into a formal position and had a mudra, and I was like, and I just went into this meditation, and all of a sudden I feel this presence, and I open my eyes, and she's like this, right in my face. And she's right there, and she still didn't want me to touch her, because every time I would lift a hand, she'd be like, put her ears back, like, no. But I can't even tell you what that whole experience was about, except that I had to be really disciplined and say to myself, don't try to do anything to her. Just let her have this experience. And she kind of started getting a little playful, but again, she didn't want me to interact with her. And then eventually she walked away. But it was probably about 15 minutes. And from what you just said, I think that was a micro moment. Like it felt like if I have to go back and build a relationship from here, then we'll get back to where we need to be. But I have to let go of my agenda thinking, but she needs this from me because she's herself. She knows what she needs. And yeah, she's in pain and that's bothersome to me, but trusting too. It's like to go back to trusting. Like it's not all about us. It's about everything and calling in the guides, calling in the plant world and the energies, the land spirits, and just saying, "Help me here. Like I can only do so much. I need your help." And if I'm not able to do something, I'm going to trust that. And obviously, if it was critical, I would handle it probably differently, obviously, but just trusting the process.
Yeah.
But the hard thing is when you have a time frame, like you guys have a time frame for the trailer.
But
So that
it's
creates,
huge because it's not like we're working with a inanimate object. Like we're working with a 1,000-pound sentient being with a breath
right.
and a heart rate and the ability to make choices for herself. And it's like
Yep.
I sometimes that's an unconscious thought, but I'm never like, I always go out to them with the intention like they have choice. But when I step back and am like, actually take a look at that, it's like, wow, there's a lot that goes into simply asking you to be in my space. There's a lot that goes into
Mm,
asking you for me to have my hand touch your nose. And not just because she's, a previously wild horse or whatever. It's like simply because she's another
mm,
being. And
mm,
it's, I mean, this, what you're expressing with this horse that you're working with now, like I feel a very similar feeling with Grace, especially recently, because she's had more setbacks since we've had her than our other two horses combined. And it's a constant like game, if you will, of okay, this made you uncomfortable. now we're set back. Now maybe it takes longer for me to approach you. How do I make this better while also making sure that you're being seen, heard, felt, and gotten? It's a beautiful
Hmm.
sort of connection and relationship. And I feel like what'll eventually come down is this realization from all involved of, oh wow, you are listening to me. I just need 15 minutes to chill, and you can be in my space, but don't touch me. Okay, cool. Maybe
Hmm.
after that 15 minutes I'll come into your space, and here's my nose. Maybe will you scratch my nose? Okay, that's it. But that's a
Mm.
huge step in that moment. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful connection.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. Thank you for that insight because um, it'll make me, I can already feel a stronger sense of being able to be present with that versus like, what am I doing? I need to make something happen here. Um, but yeah, it's really well, one thing that I know that um, you probably do naturally if you don't even maybe you even know it, but one thing is about threshold, like, and I tell my team of people here, like, because they'll be afraid because they want to have a connection and they don't want to do anything wrong, and I'm like, if you do something and you push it too far with them, the only thing based on biology and also just spiritual connection is you don't leave it that way. Like if you rupture, it's called rupture and repair, right? And if you rupture the threshold, if you go through and it sets them into a state where they're like, all right, trust has been broken, then I think as long as you leave them, you don't leave them in that state. You wait until you get them, you regulate with them as long as that takes, and you get them back to that place. And then when you leave, you can come back and you can and your relationship isn't where it was versus, I mean, it isn't ruptured. And, and that's all part of polyvagal. And it sounds like, uh, the get gotten from Sarah Schulte. Yeah. And that's all part of that is like rupture and repair, right? And it works beautifully with the horses because we're humans and I'll go out and I'll rupture, something, not horribly, but I just do it out of instinct because I need to get something done. And instead of feeling bad or anything, I'm like, okay, sorry. And then I'll just like meditate, I'll bring them down, I'll do whatever until they come into a regulated state. And then we'll go. And then it helps me too, because like as our nervous systems learn to do that, it's like one of the things I was going to say, Jason, when you were talking about yoga, because I got into yoga too when I was in Santa Barbara, which was totally random, but is all of these ancient practices are all designed to bring us back into our center or our home or all these different names for that, right? And it's back into this place, I think, from a biological standpoint of regulation, of our true nature, of our instinct, of our wisdom. And our ancestors, way or indigenous cultures, they understood this. They didn't need to be taught the different parts of the nervous system, right? I mean, this is just my own thought process. They didn't need to be taught this is ventral vagal. They understood this whole rhythm of coming back and connection because they maybe operated from there. I mean, and this is a big generalization, but all these practices were created for that reason. And now it seems like understanding the nervous system and the fact that the only way that you can control the nervous system is through breath. Otherwise, it operates totally automatically. But breath is the one avenue we have to our nervous system to control it. And all of these practices are breath practices, right? And um, I don't know. I just find it fascinating to have this understanding, and also like that we have a mammalian nervous system. The horses do too, and everywhere it's just mirrored. I do somatic experiencing for myself as part of this program, and when she works on me, I learn more about what's effective to work on them. And I also learn because when she works on me, it's nonverbal. And so it's energetic within the body somatically. And so it confirms, because I came from a different place, so I always have a doubting mind, like, oh, really, is this doing anything? And so I even learn more, like, oh, look at the healing that's happening in my body, and just by working energetically, I'm able to release and act out certain stuck energies and certain traumas that I've experienced. And so it's the same for them. There's no reason why it's not the same for them, that we can't bring our hands, our healing hands, the energy from our hands, our intention even, and if we're serious, and I don't know, maybe if you just really sink into that from a trailer perspective, but um bringing it all like really into that powerful place, that it can really shift things. And as I say it out loud, I still don't believe it. There's a little thing in my mind saying, "Oh, forget it." You gotta. But it's like, no, with coming into that, that's where I want to live from. That's where I want to keep coming back to. Is that center, that place that knows this is truth, and it's hard because we've been brought up to not believe that, and
Yeah, it's like we
so
we
it's a
need
whole
so much like science and people to come in and present a stamp of approval on things that, like you're alluding to with the indigenous cultures, they just knew naturally because they were connected to it on a day-to-day basis for their own
right,
survival. And it just comes out
right.
so simple that way, but then we really resist that on a day-to-day basis. And Alyssa and I have joked around a lot recently, like we kind of live at an ashram right now. Like it's very, we're in the middle of nowhere, what most people would consider the middle of nowhere countryside, a lot of acreage around us, and um, just connecting in with nature, and then realizing like the horses are nature, we are nature, and these more practical things that come in because we have to like move like physically to another
Hmm.
location, or we've got to do this or that. Then it's like, to me it's like the brain comes in and just says, okay, well, I got all this like practical stuff, and now let me analyze it, and let me,
Yeah.
and what it sounds like you're getting at is like the more we just regulate that and and come back to that center point, um the more we're able to actually make positive progress. And that's what I learned from like the trust technique. That's what I've learned in yoga. That's what I've learned in all these different sorts
Hmm.
of modalities that I've dabbled in, about just energy flow. um but like you, I think it's natural for the human intellect, to come in
Right.
and try to be intelligent, where it doesn't really require a whole lot of intelligence. And what I've been trying to encourage Alyssa in this whole process is that, uh, to make it playful for herself and the horses, and to, I spent the better part of 4 decades of my life in complete despair, in all honesty, until I realized,
Mm.
like, the childlike aspect of like how we were supposed to exist, and like everything doesn't need to be perfect, and everything doesn't need to happen like, uh
Hmm.
there are times and places for that, I suppose. Like the military in me says, like, if, for those who are at war and have to accomplish a mission, like there's a different sort of like aspect to that. But people can't live in that forever, and when they come out of that, they need some serious like reconstruction, every single one of them, whether they're at the tip of the spear kicking down the doors and shooting people, or back behind the scenes pushing paperwork.
Wow.
um and it's just, I don't know, like I think we overcomplicate things because of our intellect, where it just becomes, the more fun we can make it and the more light we can make it, the more we heal, and
Yeah.
uh, the better our experiences. And on that note, how do you like to reinforce your horses?
Reinforce my horses. Expand on that a little bit for me.
Well, if some would say like reinforcement has to, have a candy involved. I kind of go back to like when I was a kid getting a haircut at the barber shop, and the barber would hand me a lollipop or something, but I didn't particularly like lollipops, so I was like, that wasn't so reinforcing to me for like sitting in the chair
Uh,
nicely. But you know how do you demonstrate to your horses that you're there for them, and that you've got their back, and that
mm.
um you appreciate their efforts?
I go back to, well, um, I'm thinking all these different thoughts, but spending quality time with them. And my go-to is co-regulating with them. Is I feel like helping them with that is a powerful gift. It's and I hesitate to say it because it's funny, because even in my conditioning it's like, oh, but that's kind of boring and I'd rather have a lollipop, right? Um but yeah, I just feel that there's really, I see their response to it, and it's just like with James French. I mean, all of the work that he does, and just being with horses in that way, I think reinforces the relationship. It lets them know I have their back. And like in trust technique, they know, all of a sudden they're like, oh, I know when you're with me, I can feel safe. And so maybe that's really the thing, and that's congruence, is that's the main point of this sanctuary, is when you come in here, we want to create a place of safety for all sentient beings, like, and I protect this place pretty fiercely at times from things that are impinging on that because of the energy. But I feel that, but then I also do fun things, like I also have I love like cutting their hair, and and grooming in a way, and like, I mean, this is completely playful, but just like, some of these horses are older and they've just been through just craziness, and it's like, oh, we're getting you ready for your championship show. You're gonna win it this time, and just like making this whole scene for them and playful, and my team, and we cut their hair and we get them all primped up and everything. I mean, just and they seem to enjoy it. There's just, and probably because our energy is very playful, and um so that, and then yeah, I would say just doing that, spending really quality time and letting them know, and being attentive, like being really, I try to be really aware of all the dynamics that are going on, and noticing again when we're in this regulated state, right? We can like tune in at a different level, and we can be like, oh, what's going on with the Zool? And so catching needs that they have because of some of their more serious conditions quickly, and then addressing it.
That's
And
beautiful. I feel like
thank you.
regulation and just spending that time with them is such a beautiful way to reinforce. As we wrap up, where can people find you?
We have a website, congruencetucson.com, and my email is peggy@congruencetucson.com.
It's wonderful. It's been such a wonderful time speaking with you today. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your wise wisdom with us and giving us a bit more insight onto your story and the kind of work that you do and everything.
Thank you. It's been really fun to talk to you guys, and very have a lot to ponder after this as well. So thank you for that,
You're
Yeah.
on mute.
and thank you for the work that you're doing just in general.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.